Welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. And always appreciate if you have any comments or any thoughts about this. Very much appreciated. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. I have one comment, Rabbi.
What's that? Yeah, go ahead.
You see, when you have something with God in it, you don't throw it away. You bury it.
Yes, if it has God's name, if it has God's name written on it, like one of the, there's like maybe 5 names, something like that. Here's one of them. And then there's Elohim, right? And possibly this spelt out as Aleph Daled Nud Yud, or El. I'd have to look up exactly what the various names that are considered holy names would be.
The way I want to give all my books to the shul, so because it's got God's name in them.
Okay, well, if it's God in English, I don't think it counts the same way as if it is in Hebrew, like in a prayer book or a Tanakh or something like that. You can see, but hopefully the shul has a way of taking care of these things too. So,
Okay.
All right. So we had talked about the Torah's prohibition about consulting the dead. Occult practices is what we call them. And we're going to go into a little bit of a different take based on this. So let's take a look. Ki hagoyim ha'ele, for these nations, asher ata yoreshotam, which you are about to inherit, el ma'onanim ve'el kosmim yishma'u. So, whatever that ma'onain was, right? We said, we had Rabbi Akiva's explanation in the Chachamim, in terms of looking for times, to be able to look at what are propitious times. The El Kosmim, again, we had that definition of a kosem up here, because I believe it says here ksamim. I had interpreted it based on the dictionary as a spellcaster, right? And let's see, let me find out where he has it, because I thought Rashi did have that in it.
I have soothsayers and augurs.
Thank you. There we go. All right. There we are. I was trying to see if I could find it in the Rashi, but I'm here. Kesem, ksamim. The one who takes his stick and this is the one who says takes his stick and he says to his stick, consults with his stick as to whether or not he should go a particular way, etc., etc. Okay. So they pay attention to these, right? They yishma'u, right? But for you, lochein, that is not the case. Natan lacha Hashem Elokecha, has the Lord your God given you. So in other words, that you'll see what has God given us. We'll see that in a moment, and that's who we're supposed to pay attention to, and not these soothsayers and augurs, as you mentioned, Golda. So let's take a look.
So we're ignoring everything that Moshe did, right?
No.
Yeah, only a little. Only a little.
No, in what sense did he do that? I mean, he didn't consult the.
He had to have the staff. He had to have the staff to do the things.
True, but it wasn't that he was consulting the staff. Okay,
True.
That's the situation here. Is they're treating the staff. If he had treated the stick as an idol, as a decisor for him, that would be a different thing. But he never did.
Okay.
He used it to perform the miracles. That's what he did. That's not what they're talking about here. But I think it's good that you questioned it, Golda. I mean, I really do. I think we need to try to be careful about this. Anyway, Lochein natan lecha Hashem Elohecha. Not so did the Lord your God give you. Lishmoa el ma'onanim. To pay attention, right, to me'onanim, augurs, ve'el kosmim, and these kosmim. Sha'arei hishrash hina al hanaviim, because in fact, and Rashi is anticipating where this is going to go. He has caused his divine presence, the Shekhinah, to alight on the prophets, the Urim and Tummim. And not only that, we do have the Urim and the Tummim. They are a specific way, right, that the high priest had in which to foretell the future or to consult. So I know that it's not that different from some of the stuff he's talking about, but they are specific. And of course, the prophet is a different. When you read the prophets, of course, you realize that they aren't simply fortune tellers by any means, but they basically understand. And Maimonides, of course, goes overboard with saying they're just so rational, and they're able to, connect the dots and tell you the consequences of particular behavior, etc. And in that sense, they foresee the future. So here we go. Navi.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Dave.
So, when we've been going through these passages, I've been kind of wondering, when we talk about the sticks and the sorcery and all that,
yes.
I mean, is that really, is that technology? I mean, in the sense of, in other words, I mean, basically, because in some sense, we rely on technology, or we shouldn't, though, worship technology, right? And I mean, that's what, that's the whole point here. But back then, of course, they didn't call it technology, it would be sorcery. But, if you look at, someone from, that period looks at today, they look at everything we do would be sorcery. So anyway, that's my question is that what we're really talking about here when we talk about, these kinds of things?
So that's a really wonderful question, and probably could even possibly be a PhD thesis. Okay, I would say that, just sort of speaking off the cuff, I think that I wouldn't. The reason why I wouldn't call technology sorcery is that it is actually based on normal natural phenomena, whereas what they're talking about here, I think definitely even back then would be considered occult practices. And the thing about occult practices is they don't draw on, and they don't depend directly on natural phenomena and how they take place. Whereas
there's no basis in science. That's what you're saying. And I understand that. Okay, that makes sense, because again, someone would mistake or think of what we have today as potentially sorcery, but like you said, from if they were from a different time. But again, that makes sense. It's based in science, not based in something else. Okay, thank you.
Right. I mean, at least that's my initial response. Having said that, I do need. This might be the right place for me to comment on astrology, right? And the fact that this is based, of course, on the position of the planets and the stars and things like that. And does Judaism put astrology into the same category as what we've been reading? So it seems to me that the way we're defining things here does not include astrology, and that in fact that there may well be we talk about the mazal, right, which has to do with an astrological sign. And my sense is that there is a belief that we are influenced in these subtle ways, or sometimes maybe not so subtle ways, by these kinds of astrological issues. But the distinction may be a subtle one, but nevertheless, it is a distinction. And that is that we also believe that God controls those particular signs. In other words, it is God who controls the way in which the stars appear and the movement of the planets, that because we believe in this transcendent level of existence, it's not the same as simply believing that the stars, that our fortune is determined by the stars, and that's all there is to it. Because at least within Judaism, because we believe that there is a divine element that actually controls these stars and that is apart from these stars in that sense, that we still can pray to God. There is that ability to pray to God and to therefore avoid what might be, astrologically predictable. And in fact, there is a statement, I maybe in the Talmud somewhere, my father of blessed memory used to quote it quite often, which was Ein Mazal LeYisrael, which of course on the surface could mean Israel doesn't have any mazel. But I think what it really means is that Israel is not controlled ultimately by astrological signs. I believe that was the intent of that original statement, to say that we always have the option of prayer. And prayer is considered to be a very powerful medium. And whether or not there's scientific evidence to support the power of prayer, I have seen, statements that seem to support that particular issue. Nevertheless, and regardless, that is something that is always left open to us. And in fact, the verse where Isaac says to his son Jacob, where he comes to him, he says, Hakol Kol Yaakov. Just part of that statement. He says the voice is the voice of Jacob. And one of the interpretations, and it's a major interpretation, is that Jacob's power comes from his voice and his ability to pray. So let's keep going. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. Thank you for raising the question, David. It's great. It certainly opened up a few things to think about. Right. So here we go. Navi mikir becha, a prophet from your midst. Me'achecha kamoni, from your brethren like myself. Yakim lecha Hashem Elokecha. The Lord your God will arise, or cause to arise amongst you. Elav tishmaun. Pay heed to him. Pay attention to him. That's who we need to take seriously, and that is the prophetic voices. And again, this is something that one can think about and meditate as to, to what degree do we do this? To what degree should we do this? And in what degree is it actually representing desirable human behavior in every sense? From your midst, from your brethren, like myself. Yeah, question? Harlan, did you want to say something?
False prophets. The people
coming up, Harlan, coming up right now.
Okay.
Coming right up. Whether we'll deal with it this year or not, I don't know. But if we get to this next year, it's coming up. It really is. Okay. Just as I am from your midst and from your brethren. Yakim lachem, I'm sure this is just a botched print here. Yakim lachem tachtai. So he will arise amongst you in my place. V'chein menavi lenavi. And likewise from one prophet to the next. Let's take a look and see if there's any more Rashi on this. No Rashi. So let's keep going. Right here. It's just as all that you requested, right? You asked, Me'im Hashem Elokecha, from the Lord your God, Bechorev, at Mount Chorev, in other words, Mount Sinai, Beyom HaKahal Lemor, on the day of assembly, saying, this is what you said at the time, Lo Osef Lishmoa, I cannot continue to listen et kol Hashem Elohai, to the voice of the Lord my God, ve'et ha'esh hagdolah, and this mighty fire hazot, hagdolah hazot, this mighty fire, lo od, I cannot continue to gaze on the lo amut without dying. In other words, if I continue to do these things, I am going to perish. I'm going to die. No Rashis on these. Vayomer Hashem Elai, and God said, the Lord said to me, Heitivu asher diberu. They've spoken well. This is appropriate. This is just fine. No problem. Navi akim lahem. I will cause to arise amongst them a prophet, mikerev achehem, from the midst of their brethren, kamocha, just like you. This is what God said to Moses at the time, and Moses is telling the Israelites, right? V'natati dvarai befiv, and I shall place my words in his mouth, v'diber alehem, and he will speak to them, et kol asher atzavenu, all that which I command him. V'haya ish, and as for the man, asher lo yishma el dvarai, who chooses not to pay attention to my words, not to listen or to hearken to my words, asher yidaber bishmi, which this prophet understood, will speak in my name, anochi et rosh mi emo, I will require it of him, I will hold him accountable, is what this is saying. And now we get into it, right, Harlan? Ach hanavi. However, the prophet Asher Yazid, who intentionally, l'daber davar bishmi, who intentionally speaks of something in my name, et asher lo tziviti l'daber, that which I did not command him to speak. V'asher yidaber, and who speaks b'shem Elohim acherim, or who speaks in the name of other gods, umeit hanavi hahu, that prophet shall die. It's a capital offense to do this. Going on, v'chi tomar, and should you say bilvavecha in your hearts? In other words, if you should think, echa neda et hadavar, how do we know? How are we going to know that matter or that word? Asher lo dibro Hashem. How do we know that God didn't say this to him? How do we know? Asher yidaber b'shem Hashem v'lo hiyeh hadavar v'lo yavo. So the way we know, and this is not going to be easy, that which the prophet speaks in the name of God, v'lo yeh hadavar, and that particular thing will not be, right? Will not transpire. V'lo yavo, and it won't come. Hu hadavar, that is proof, right? That asher lo dibro Hashem, that the Lord did not speak to him, which doesn't sound all that helpful, right? In other words, what about until if he's predicting it off some at some point? Does that mean you have to wait until that point? Bezadon he has done it intentionally, Dibro Hanavi. That prophet has spoken, willfully. Lo tagur mimenu, you shall not fear him. So there is some Rashi on this, and this is the second time we're encountering the idea of the false prophet. And if I'm not mistaken, the first time where they talk about the false prophet, I think it is a little more helpful. And that is to say that if the prophet is telling you to do things that are not commanded in the Torah, that the Torah does not command you to do, or tells you to do just the opposite, I would say for sure, right? If he's telling you to contravene a negative commandment, then there are problems. Then you need to really question the validity of his prophecy. I will tell you that in actual fact, there are situations, I can think of two different situations where we have such issues. And in one case, it's simply part of a narrative. We know that God only wanted sacrifices made in the temple. And by the time Elijah showed up, the temple had been made, it was standing, etc. And yet he challenged the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, not in the temple, not in Jerusalem, and he offered up a sacrifice there. So that is an interesting situation, but we could certainly, I believe, say, well, the circumstances demanded it. He wasn't doing it as a routine offering, he was doing it as a test. Okay. But then we have the issue of Ezekiel. And Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, almost was not included in the canon of Scripture. because Ezekiel speaks about a temple, and many of the laws and rules involved in that temple do not necessarily jibe with the laws and rules that are mentioned in the book of Leviticus and Numbers in the Torah. So where is Ezekiel getting this? Well, regardless, maybe the answer is, well, he's talking about a third temple, and maybe also that there's enough about Ezekiel that certainly sounds legitimate and certainly is about appealing to the people to return to being faithful to God, etc. So there are these questions, but there may well be ways in which to satisfy them. So, Asher lo tzivitiv ladaver, which I did not command him to speak. Now, this is interesting. Aval tzivitiv lachavero. So, what Rashi is saying here is, I may have commanded them to his, to his colleague, but I didn't command him to say it. In other words, if he is saying in God's name that in other words, the idea is that God told me to say this, and that is not the case. And even though they may be legitimate words, meaning they may be words that God spoke to his fellow, to another fellow, to a legitimate prophet, but he's trying to say that God said it to him. So that's the infraction here. Or if he speaks in the name of other gods, well, that's clear enough, right? This is saying, even if he was saying the law according to its proper way, as he's telling you to do things that the Torah commands you, okay, le'esor et ha'isur, to forbid that which is forbidden, u'lahatir et hamutar, and to declare permissible that which is permissible, even though the Torah does this. But if he says it in the name of some other god, again, he's a false prophet. So we now have two criteria that are involved that are helpful, right? Umeit bechenek, he shall die. Bechenek, the way he's put to death is strangulation. Shlosha mitatan bidei adam. There are three of death penalties that are at the hands of human beings, right? And let's see. Okay, so let's see exactly what he's saying here. Hamit nabe ma shelo shama. In other words, I think what Rashi is saying is that there are three circumstances where the prophet is supposed to be executed by a human court. That's what he's saying. That there are three situations where the prophet is executed by a court, as opposed to leaving it up to God to take care of. Hamit nabe ma shelo shama. What we said above. In other words, who's prophesying something that, frankly, he himself never heard. Umashe no le'marlo, and what was never said to him. U'le'mar l'chaveiro, and something that was stated to his fellow. Va'amit nabe b'shem avodat kochavim, or someone, I think this is the second one, I believe. Let's take a look at how many. Right, so this is something he never heard. This wasn't said to him, but was said. So this is number two. It was stated to his fellow. And one who prophesies in the name of some idol. Those are all three punishable by a court. Aval hakovesh et nevuato. But someone who doesn't prophesy, he holds back on his prophecy. V'ha'over al divrei navi, interesting. It says one who transgresses the words of a prophet. V'ha'over al divrei atzmo, and even if he transgresses his own words, in other words, maybe the prophet himself, mitatan bidei shamayim, their death is at the hands of heaven. Shenemar Anochi edrosh me'imo, because as we read above, it states, I will hold him accountable. I will hold him accountable. So I'm going to set them up. This is a good place. We are at a new chapter. So this is a new idea. We'll stop here for now. We'll pick it up in the future. So, any comments about the false prophet? Harlan, as you can see, we are dealing with it. We dealt with it. Any questions, any thoughts? Ken, it's good to see you. So lovely for you to be here. So any thoughts, any questions?
Yeah, I have one.
David, I see you do have a question. Sorry, you do have a question. Yes.
No.
So
it seems to me under the okay, you went through the three circumstances, but if you've got somebody if you've got somebody that basically, the test is if somebody says it's from the word of God and then it doesn't happen, then basically they're a false prophet. That's one of them. I mean, the other ones that we talked about are somewhat, you can you can get evidence, if they've said in the name of another God, or if they've done, the three that you outlined are helpful. But the one where basically the test is if they've said it's in the name of God, it doesn't happen, they're a false prophet. But people, and I'm assuming the reason that's there is because people can use that to manipulate other people, right? I mean, you could say that, this event is going to happen, 20 years from now in order to influence people to do something that's in your interest. And then, knowing full well that, it's never going to happen or whatever it is. But basically, as a result of that, you gain power and influence. And, I'm obviously alluding to a few people around here that have done that. So what's but, there's no way to test that other than to wait for the thing not to happen, right? And just that's the part I'm struggling with.
Right. Okay. So this is a thought I have, and I'm wondering if Rashi's interpretation, which of course is based on ancient interpretations to be found in the Talmud, etc., which are way back, are actually the way they understand the statement in the Torah where it says, if he says it and it doesn't happen. In other words, if you break apart the three examples that we had, in a sense, they're all things that never really happened. And that it's not talking about his ability to prognosticate and hold that over our heads. It's rather talking about the three different circumstances that Rashi spelled out for us. And that's what it means when it says, if he prophesies a thing and it didn't happen. Meaning, so for example, he says it in God's name, God never spoke to him. Okay.
Right.
We're going to trying to prove that one may not be so easy either. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Or the fact that it was said, or it never was said at all. In other words, just cooked up, or, these various different things that Rashi spelled out for us. And that's what it means, which is a lot more helpful at any rate. Not to say that it's a walk in the park, but at least it's more helpful than this prognosticating kind of proof, which sounds somewhat manipulative under the best of circumstances. Yep. So I appreciate your saying that, because it never occurred to me in the past that these particular three examples that Rashi gives us are in fact what it means when he says this.
That makes sense. So essentially that's a decomposition of that statement, right? Exactly. Okay. Exactly. Yep. Okay. All right. That helps. Still tough, but it helps.
I know. Yes. All right. So I'm going to let it go at here and wish everyone a good day. Sorry, let's just stop the recording.